Well, first of all, thank you all for coming this evening. It's starting to drizzle out there, so we're very grateful that you could all make it. And I want to thank Tom Yoon in turn, and also Brett, who's absent, and of course Isabel Taubi, who are the creators of this series of programs under the title of Art in the First Person. And we have since been listening to quite a diverse group of people talk about, from different perspectives of the art world, addressing this idea. So art in the first person has become more of an art in many different persons and many different voices. And I want to also say that I'm extremely happy to have Galia Solomonoff here with us. She's an extraordinary architect from Argentina and who has lived and worked since 1987 in New York City, where she established Solomonoff Architecture Studio right here in Chelsea. She's actually a neighbor of ours. The title, Why Art and Architecture Today, is a topic that we have been and will continue to explore from several different perspectives. First, we had an artist, Terence Gower, whose work is anchored in modern architecture from both Latin America and elsewhere. You know his work well. Followed by a curator, Pablo León de la Barra, who, having graduated as an architect, has not only integrated those studies into his curatorial practice, but turned architecture into the central concern of exhibition making. And today we will hear from Galia, an architect whose passion and dedication is to work with and focus on art-based projects, artists included, museum spaces and buildings, as well as public and private spaces in which art and architecture embrace one another. Of course, we can trace many impulses and origins that animate the marriage of art and architecture from practically the beginning of time, as our body is the prototype of any architectural structure you can imagine, and it prevails in most of our methods to measure the world. There are, of course, other standards and models, especially if we start measuring outer space or the speed of light, etc., etc. However, that's another territory that we shall not embark on here tonight. Maybe some other occasion. In our contemporary art world, and I'm speaking from my Latin American perspective, the informal and organic forms of architecture juxtaposed and seen in conjunction with the leftovers and ruins sometimes of 1950s and 1960s utopian and modern visionary architecture have offered a wide and broad terrain for inquiry, leading into, aside from art and architecture, social, economic, and political contexts as well. And I can only say, I mean, off the top of my head, I'm like remembering Abraham Cruz Villegas and his Autoconstrucciones, or Toro Lab in Tijuana, and there's this wonderful architect woman in Colombia who's been working with Iquitos and these phantom oil towns in Venezuela that were left behind when the oil was exhausted and the whole population left, and so on and so on. And you probably know many more than I. It has sort of broadened out into these cooperative, community-oriented, but then there's also these individual artists as architects or architects as artists who've branched out and kind of like built a whole theory on this at this point. Anyway, I am not sure exactly what Galia is going to be discussing besides her own work, but these are some of the topics that have animated us to bring the people to the foreground that have dealt with architecture in a professional way, such as we haven't. So she had to talk a little bit about her career. Galia has received numerous awards, beginning with the Foreign Student Scholarship Award in 1989 and in 1990. Then she was, of course, the best student in the School of Architecture in 1990 from City College, where she graduated magna cum laude. And in 1994, she received the Master of Architecture from Columbia University and was immediately awarded the McKim Prize for Excellence in Design Work and the William Kinney Fellows Traveling Prize. Among the many projects that Galia has worked on is one in Rotterdam with OMA, which is Rem Koolhaas's Office of Metropolitan Architecture, and she was project designer for Bernard Tschumi Architects and Raffaele Vignoli Architects. Before she began her own firm, Galia was a partner in Open Office, where she was in charge of Dia Beacon, which everybody here, I believe, is very well known. So please join me in welcoming Galia.
Carla, thank you so much. SBA, thank you so much. I love to talk to people outside architecture. I love to talk within architecture, but especially now I'm interested in the broader world. Carla has been an instrumental part of allowing people from many parts of the world to be welcome in New York. Just one example that I have, I think a party in 1987 that Fabian and I, Kate Cobon, Luis Franchella went to Carla's loft on Houston and Bowery, where Paulino's Pizzeria is now. But this was like a part, there were 2 or 3 Latin Americans, but there were people from all over the world. And it was like at Houston and Bowery, and it felt like an open house, like a majestic, super large loft where people could move around, and there were always guests. My sense is that there was always people staying in your house for some time, and it was this kind of amazing salon, hotel, party place. And so this is part of a New York that breathes art and architecture, and today I want to also include politics into the discussion, and I'm going to also talk about conflicts, because the things that I'm going to talk about, it's not like I know they work this way. Basically, I'm sharing with you my work, and I'm not a theorist. I'm a practicing architect that teaches architecture at Columbia, and so when I say things, please don't think that I have resolved them in my mind. I'm sharing with you raw insight. And so the beginning of my career is this understanding, and this is not based on a person. My parents are not an artist and a politician, nothing to do with that. This is a metaphor for us to understand how I see my role. So I see the architect as and I'm not talking about contemporary art. I'm talking about from Hellenic times, from Greece to Rome, to the medieval times, to now. So I see architecture as the player in the city that unites unites art and politics. I will broadly define an artist as somebody that anyone that is willing to sacrifice to produce work with the understanding that sacrifice is necessary to transcend your own life. So if you are willing to do some extreme trade-offs where you venture into doing something without kind of the societal or cultural benefits, then I would say you are in a position to be an artist. It's not a guarantee that if you do that, you will become an artist, but it's a prerequisite to be an architect, to be an artist, to understand the role of sacrifice. And I would define a politician as someone that understands that compromise is an effective way to get things done. Not the only way, but that compromise, and I understand that in the art world, compromise is a negative word. In my world, compromise is a necessary word. And so I would define the architect as a conflicted child of this marriage of art and politics. So we have a desire to transcend. We want to build something that goes beyond ourselves, but we are not very clear about the trade-offs. And so we are caught between, it would be great to do that, but I want to be considered an artist, and I want my name to be understood. And you cannot really, you really have to be clear about one way or the other. And so I'm not going to resolve this question right now, but for me, this picture, it's all the problems in a good way. So we can discuss this as a success. You have the city of Bilbao, a working town in the north of Spain. It's not Barcelona, it's not Madrid, it's a working town. It's a town that did not have pride before the Guggenheim. You have the Guggenheim, and you have Frank Gehry, a Canadian architect that went all the way to LA to do his own career in a different milieu, not in New York, not in Boston, not in the places where our architecture was sanctified, but in LA. And you have Jeff Koons, who I know for you manifests a lot of the conflicts of success, ideas, sell out, all these things. So this, to me, is the entire picture of the good and the difficult of doing art and architecture and politics in the city. The other thing that I'm convinced of is that the city is the most important invention we have. As people, that is our most, the highest achievement, and everything comes from having been able to organize ourselves in a city, build cities, and build cities denser and denser over time. And I'm a proponent. Every time people talk about gentrification, I think gentrification, it's also a word that could be constructed as negative, but it can also be seen as positive. You can see it as an attraction of capital. You can see it as a way of maximizing resources. You can see it as a way of integrating different cultures. And so there's a lot of positives in the city and its making and its progress. So tonight I'm going to talk about some of the work. These are artists with whom I have worked, and I'm going to select a number of them and talk about the work. The other thing that in architecture there's no I, there's only we. And the we in this case is Solomonoff Architecture Studio. That is the firm that I am kind of like a creative director. Anything we do everything that I do has been drawn by others, corrected by me. If something goes wrong, it's my responsibility. But if something goes right, it's everyone's work that surface. And so this is the people that have been instrumental in the work that I'm going to show tonight. And our work, it's very local because we work a lot with artists, and most of our work happen in New York State. There's a couple of projects we are doing now outside, and I'm going to show, but most of the projects happen in Manhattan, Beacon, Brooklyn, and Chelsea. And so I'm going to start showing you work with a project that I did for Artist Space in 1999 with when Claudia Gould was the director of Artist Space. And so this is an idea that comes from Freud, and this is kind of like the way Freud understands the artistic mind. And so he said that this is the previous one, this is his drawing in the book. And then this is what each of the three things mean. Id is the impulses and drives. So like if you feel like having drugs, that's the part that is telling you have drugs. If you feel that I shouldn't have drugs, it's bad. My teacher said I shouldn't have drugs. My priest said, my father said, then this is the superego telling you don't do it. And the ego is the one that has the difficult task of mediating between these two. And so in Freud's description, the perfect artist, it's like the joint of a horse and a rider, a jockey, where, you know, when a horse knows where it's going and the jockey knows that the most important thing is to be one with the horse so that the horse feels the strength and the confidence and goes as fast as he can. So in a Freud description, the horse is the ID, is the impulse. The jockey is the superego, the paternal figure driving, and the conjunction of the two is the ego. And so in a perfect artistic experience, which is different than a perfect personal experience, you may have achieved that kind of flow where, let's say, for example, Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon, very difficult person, very conflicted mind, but amazing artist. So he had these things figured out for his work. So when I look at the work that I want to do as an individual, not as SAS, but as Galia Solomonoff, my biggest interest is in the oldest things. And so I love bricks. I love bricks because you can do it in any sand, any terrain in the world. It's totally local. Every culture has brick. We have 38,000 years of doing buildings with bricks, so we know how to do it. And this is a particular engineer in Uruguay called Eladio Dieste that I studied while I was at Columbia. The irony is that it took me all the way to Columbia University to know something that was very close to home. And so the Kinney Award that I got from Columbia was to study this engineer. And so I studied all the details. And these buildings are the cheapest building you can possibly do because it's single width, double width of bricks with reinforced rebars. And the shapes are incredible. And he does everything, the roof, the walls, the columns, the floors, everything with bricks. And so this is the start, this was the departure point for the project that I did at Artist Space in 1999. And so I started studying double curvature structures that could be done with brick, then studied this 3D, then developed a painting of what I saw two-dimensionally could happen, and then develop 3D models of pieces to cast in hydrocal. And so then I was teaching at Columbia in 1999, and I put a group of students together, and we casted 600 units of white hydrocal bricks in a studio in Brooklyn, and built this installation at Artist Space, and these were this. We did about 100 of each one of these 6. And so this is the installation, and this is a project that even though it was done 15 years ago, now I'm dying to take back and rework. Again, notice this is hard to be commissioned for. This is something that I would like to do at my own risk, in a way. So that's the installation. So today I'm going to show you about 10 projects, and some of them are early, some of them are late. This is a project that I did with Lillian Ball at the same time that I was doing the effective brick. And from her, she's an artist, from her I learned a lot of casting techniques. A lot of the brick casting techniques that I use in the effective brick come from learning how to cast with soaps, how to cast with peels. Her work at that time, where this is a Advil peel, and so she would cast it in gold or silver and make jewelry. That was a light bulb. This is a sink cast in glass. And so these are tractor seats on chair pedestals. So it was a jewelry store. This is a project that I did with another colleague, Linda Talman, in Denmark, 1999 also. And here we explore plastic and like the joint between super luxurious materials, like very fine furs that were local, and plastics and IKEA that were kind of global. And so we kind of assembled this mini unit, this micro unit, to be stationed in a summer in the beach in Denmark, in Aarhus. And this is our own loft, Fabian Marcaccio and my loft. And this is also where we explore this new idea now, that at that time for me, that was to layer history, to layer an old building into a new work. So here, for example, I'm leaving carefully a layer of old paint and rust in the old window, in contrast with the beads. The other thing that to say is that, for example, the beads here come from Felix Gonzalez Torres, and in architecture we do not have the same culture as in art of appropriation. We believe that it's okay to take. We always take, because we are building something together. There's no such the idea of copying another person, it's very different for an architect than for an artist. We think you are building up a canon together in a way. So this is the loft, stretcher bars and mesh. So here I'm just showing you that how I'm learning from artists techniques that can be used in architecture. And so leaving the studs, the metal studs raw, not finishing everything, like if it was a stretcher bar, casting the zinc from paint material, plastering, and putting tile around something so that you can use it as a hook. And this is an installation in Buenos Aires, in Malva, in 2002, I believe, where we did the structure for Fabian paintings. And here we are experimenting with silicone. I mean, he's experimenting, but we are learning how to use silicone outdoors. And silicone combined with oil painting. This is a project that I did for Skowhegan School of Art. And so Tom Finkerpearl, who was the director of Skowhegan then, and now it works for the mayor, said, we need a new director's office, and we have $35,000. And I said, well, there's a Home Depot nearby, and he said yes. And so this is a building that it's done entirely. So the way I used to work in that time is with the most modest budget and me as a contractor. And so here you see everything is from Home Depot, standard windows, 2x2s, or 4x4s, and a metal roof. The metal was the most expensive thing, and it was $10,000. And so this building was built by artists on site, and it's not insulated. So there's a couple of trade-offs. And then at the end, one of the artists that I can't remember, and I don't know how to locate him, said, your building would look great if we move these boulders up there, because the columns are so thin and the roof feels like a big mammal, that if we put some big boulders, it will kind of complete the relationship between inside and outside. And so the project of these artists and their friends was to move these boulders that were down here all the way there. And that took an entire summer. I mean, it took just to move a boulder, it would take we would move it from here to here in a day, and then the next day. And so what I love is that he volunteered that idea, and he didn't even say, by the way, my name is so-and-so, make sure that you give me credit. But the other thing, I think what he loved about working with me is that I said, okay, it will take an entire summer. Are you willing to put the time of the entire summer into these? And this is the way an architect responds to things. We think of time very different than you. You think about, an installation needs to be done by a certain day. I say, the work needs to be done in this way. I may not get to January 15. And people sometimes have a very hard time understanding that you cannot get to a certain date when you're coordinating the work of 60 people. And so the understanding of what a product is and what will is, it's different for an artist and an architect. And so this brings us to the beacon. So at this moment, it's 2000. I'm working in New York with Jessica Stockholder and a number of artists, helping them do installations in Paris, in a airport, doing all the permits, helping people with their studios. And Dia comes along, Michael Govan, and I would describe him as like when I think of a politician, I think of Michael Govan. And I know you may think that that's a negative. That's, for me, it's a positive. For some reason, he has made it his mission to build enormous things for artists. Yes, there is a benefit to him, of course. And so he contacted us and asked if we can measure this building. And so we go on a weekend, and I used to be a surveyor. I paid my way through Columbia by surveying buildings, which basically it's the easiest, best well-paid job you can ever have. All you need is a measuring tape and time and know how to draw a straight line, and you get paid much more than a draft person. And so my job through Columbia was to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, go to the Bronx, and measure these. This woman had 65 buildings, and so I would go and measure all these buildings for her, and send, she would send me a check, and never supervised. It was a dream job. And so when he said, "Can you survey this building?" I said, "Yes, of course we can survey this building." So what does a survey mean? I don't have the survey drawings, but it means you count every brick, you count everything. It's an accounting job of architecture. And so then he introduced us to Robert Irwin. And Robert Irwin was coming from the very traumatic experience of working at the Getty. If you all know what that was, he had a terrible fight and a terrible time with Richard Meyer. Richard Meyer was in the peak of his career, very, now it's different, but at that moment it was a very tough moment for Irwin. And so the last thing he wanted was a star architect. And to him, it was very appealing to work with a young woman, and a few other people. And so we were like, immediately, was like, I want to work with them. And so we started, so Robert Irwin helped us get the job. In turn, I felt I had to help Irwin get his project inside the building, which I failed. And so Robert Irwin and the work that you're going to see, it's all over the place. But one of the tragedies of the Beacon is that there's not a Robert Irwin piece inside the Beacon, and I'm going to tell you why. And so his first idea is you walk into this building, and I teach architecture. If a student does this entrance, they fail. They cannot, look at this entrance. Why can you not do this entrance? If two people approach the building, you're approaching the building on center, and there's an obstacle, and so you have to decide left or right. And so in architecture, this is considered a very negative thing, to have a column in the middle of the entrance. For Irwin, this was a basic move. It's like art should be experienced individually. You should not go in a bus, get in a big lobby, and go 20 people one way. If a father and child approach a building, the father should decide where he goes, the child should decide where he goes. There should not be where we go, because in Irwin's mind, there's never a we in art. There's only an I, and the ability to understand that you may die. And so that you need to see every piece of art, thinking that that person was aware and you are aware that life is finite. So for Irwin, this was no compromise. You either do this or I'm out. And this is the first thing that he says to Michael Govan and Leonardo Riggio in the first meeting. And Leonardo Riggio comes from doing Barnes and Nobles, where the entrance are like, all come with the bus, come with the bus. And so this is the first meeting, and it's set up to be a huge failure. But somehow we, and I think that was the most I could do, or the least I could do, is to say, this is going to work. This is going to be wonderful. You're going to come in, and I said, we put the Walter de Maria in there. You have perfect symmetry, and then you have a decision, and it will be obvious that this was not a mistake. And so that's the entrance we went with. And many architects, when they saw this building, they said, "Oh, this is going to be turned down. No way that this is." It's like, this is a disaster. Like, I got so many mean comments from colleagues. They never printed it, But when I would tour the building with a colleague, they would say, there's no way that this building will keep this entrance. This is temporary. And so we did it with brick very simply. And I love it now. I love that entrance. I haven't done it again because that's a Robert Irwin entrance. The other thing that Robert Irwin said is the relationship between painting outside and inside needs to be mediated. If you let all the outside in as a landscape, it's too much. It competes with painting. If you let nothing, it separates outside from inside, and that trickery makes you tired. And so, like in a mall. And so he said, we're going to, and everything had to be systematic for him. He was a racetrack horse. He made his living for 25 years going to the racetracks and making money that way. And so he was very systematic about, how to win and what to say. So he's like, the system here is like everything that moves, everything operable will be translucent, it will be transparent. Everything that is fixed, that doesn't move, will be hammer glass. And so these are two very common, very cheap glass. This is used for fire, when you don't want fire to go through because it has wire glass. And this is simple glass, the cheapest kind. And so that's what we use. The other thing that he said is this color should be gray because the eye always averages and doesn't see gray, and I love gray. And if it's black, you see the contrast and you see the frame. If it's white, the frame loses strength and it will bother you over time. And so this is the gardens. All these, the relationship between inside and outside was worked out with our help and with Irwin Design. These are, all these materials are the materials of a mall. These are concrete pavers with inset concrete. These are concrete pavers where grass goes through. The innovation here is that instead of a geometric line, we systematized a feather line. And so we pixelated that and then by hand distribute grass, no grass. And so when you see a path that where the problems between geometry and nature have been not resolved, but they have been thought about. The other thing is that in the trees follow geometric lines of the building. So when there is a wall on the building, there is a line of tree 10 feet apart. When there's in the parking lot, the trees are spaced out the same way as the columns are, 20 by 40 feet. 20 feet by 40 feet, so the trees are in a column grid, like the building inside. And so there's continuity between inside and outside. The Ipe geometry, so this is his design too, his geometry. We did all the detailing for this. Richard Serra, this is the only drawing Richard Serra produced for this entire installation. And so many artists produce, Fred Sandbach produced an incredible amount of work. Richard Serra, very little amount of work, but in a very different way. And so his desire was that he had showed these pieces, torque ellipses, in Bilbao. And so he came back from Bilbao and he's like, I do not, and I said, we can put it there so you can see it from above. And he's like, stop. I don't want anyone to see my piece from architecture from above. I want people to feel humbled by it. I want the piece to feel like if the piece would come down, the architecture would take the architecture with it. And so when you go to DIA and you experience that kind of tightness, especially in the one that is like a boat, it's because that was very much on purpose. The walls were bring closer so that the architecture and sheetrock feels like nothing in comparison to Corten steel. This is 2-inch, which is like this, of Corten steel, and there's no structure. And so one of the things is to work out the geometry and the floor so that if there's any vibrations from the train or anything, this thing doesn't tip. And so the risks are important for the engineer, for the architect, These are the pieces coming from New Jersey, from Port Elizabeth, 5 o'clock in the morning, us in the first track, installing, these are 16 tracks coming, so you have to get a highway permit, a police escort, all these. And so the architect in this role has 3 functions. One is we provide all the measurements and all the kind of detail. 2, we study safety concerns and coordinate that with the engineer. And 3, we kind of structure the installation so that, you know, at 6 o'clock in the morning, you have 6 riggers with 6 tracks that cost, you know, to move this piece costs $200,000 a day. So, and you need 2 days. So to move this piece, it's $400,000. The cost of the piece was $2 million. The cost of each is $500,000, but to move it from New Jersey to upstate New York, it's $200,000 a day. So these things, the logistic of money here, it's what many times is the difference between making the piece and not making the piece. So our role in strategizing the logistic, it's considered, it's necessary. This is a piece, green color to kind of make the concrete recede instead of light gray that will make it come closer. Michael Heizer, north, south, east, west, also one drawing. Corten steel, I think I have a picture. So in the drawing, it said that the height needed to be 21 feet. We only had 20 feet, but we had to dig another foot in order to make it 21 feet. And so the piece, the corten steel piece gets inserted, then the lip between the corten steel and concrete gets troweled by hand. There used to be wood floor here, but now we're putting a floor. To pour the floor, we had to cover this with wood so that you can pour the concrete all the way to it. And I don't have the image of this finish. And then we polish this with water by hand so that this edge, it's very, very sharp. Let me see if I have a picture of the thing. No. So this is the space in process, in preparation. So it had a wood floor. And I have a lot of people like Dia because the light is great. I didn't do the light. The only thing that I did is I didn't mess up with something that was great already. The building was done in 1929 to print cardboard boxes for the Nabisco factory. And at that moment, electricity was expensive, very, very expensive, much more than today. And so natural light was very much appreciated. And so they made 2 types of skylights, north-facing, like this one, sawtooth, and monitor skylights, just to test which one will work better. What we did is when we went there, we realized this is amazing, and we should not tamper with it. We should just respect it and make it work better. And so what we did is we installed a new white PVC roofing that has great environmental implications, but we didn't do it for that. We did that because then you get bouncing light, and it's so effective that then now if you're a photographer and you go with a light meter and you measure light outside in a rainy day or in a sunny day, there's more light inside than outside because we magnify natural light. The building is a daylight only building. There are lights, but it's just for emergency purposes. And I think we could do so much more with daylight. I think we could have so many buildings without electric light, so many museums. The Renzo Piano Museum doesn't look that promising in terms of natural light and orientation. And so the new Whitney. And so here is the existing roof, and you see just fluorescent light nested because they're necessary for code purposes and for safety. And then you see that the structure, the sheetrock walls, go to the lowest point of the structure rather than the highest, so that air can circulate and the big container of the building can contain the smallest rooms. And so the other thing is that you have these large 3 buildings that are equal, 60,000 square feet each, and then you have the rooms inside. And so these rooms are considered for painting, and these rooms are considered for sculpture. And so we devised a system where we did a model, and this is kind of like the accounting process of working with artists for architects. We did a 1 inch to 1 foot maquette of every piece Dia owned, like the entire inventory, and then proceed to test where each piece could go best. If there were 62 Warhols, we tried to put 62 Warhols, and then we tried the walls. What about if we put it from this column to that column? What about if we put it from that? So we try to do a system. And the other thing is like we try to locate everything, but also we try to do a system that will work for everyone. And so this was a 2-year process of testing one piece, testing the other, and it was worth it because it was going to be permanent. And didn't consider that an important part. But it also required the least amount of architecture. And so one of the decisions that we did is where the wall is continuous, where there's going to be painting, the column would be suppressed. And so if you have this column and you want to put painting, you make the sheetrock wall on this face. If you're going to show a sculpture, then you move the wall back. Not so far back, because then the column will be a sculpture. You will move it like 6 inches. So there's a minor articulation of the wall, which is what happened in the downflabbing or in the north, south, east, west. And so the column is expressed, and there's a kind of rhythm to the architecture. But on the painting side, the architecture recedes. And so here is the downflabbing, and you see the articulation of the column, and you see the structure. And in my view, when the structure and the architecture become kind of like a rhythm, makes a sculpture look supported better. And here you see the Warhol, and the columns are suppressed. Only in the entrance you see the columns, and I think it makes the painting feel more fluent. That's the wood that was recycled from one building, and you see the sheetrock, very simple partitions. I love when people tell me, you did nothing at Dia. I love it, because we actually did very little. But I would say we did nothing, but with an amazing precision. Like the few things we did, we studied it very carefully. And Dia changed the way I think about architecture. I can't stand exit signs like that anymore. I can't stand wiring that is not straight. I can't stand random plates. And I carry that in all our work. But at the same time, I'm adverse to overly expressive architecture too, as a result of working with Dia. These are technical details. So Robert Irwin wanted to do an installation here where the Richter is. His proposal for the installation was the Richter, it's now here. And so here you have a monitor and another monitor skylight. And what he wanted to do in this space was to put orange glass. And so it would be a cube just with an orange skylight. Super simple idea. We tested, it was beautiful. Robert Ryman comes to see his space. His space is like 300 feet away, there's an orange line from the Irwin installation 300 feet away. So Robert Ryman says, no way. And so LeWitt comes to see the space. Same thing. So there's echo. So this innocent orange skylight is reverberating naturally, and we can control it. You know, once you put orange and the sun together in a daylight-only museum, and no doors, because the museum has no doors, and no labels, and no difference between different artists, you cannot build a wall between two artists, then the entire system is in chaos. And so he tried the same technique as he tried before with Leonardo Riggio. It's this or nothing. There's no compromise. And Richter comes into town. And Richter goes to see it. And he said, I don't have a painting for you, but I can do a mirror. And the space will look great with a mirror. And so we have 4 amazing Richter mirrors that work great with the space. But here, you know, here I see how this thing unfolds. And I see the pain. And I see the kind of like, of course, you don't want to compromise, of course. Same thing with Judd. 9 boxes, square, but we have columns in between. And you cannot combine columns and boxes because they want to be in the same place. A 9 square grid wants to be where the columns are. But here is the key. Judd is dead. And you cannot go against somebody. Either you put the work the way he drew it, or you don't put it. But you cannot compromise with a dead artist. And so he got the piece. And I'm very, very happy that he did. Now, the other issue is, I'm not going to talk about technical things. You don't need that. I don't have a picture of, I promised Robert Irwin that I would never show any images of the orange skylights, or the orange drawings, or the autograph sketch that he did for me, nothing. So that piece will probably get done, and I will make sure if there's ever an occasion to get it done. So that piece didn't get done. Fred Sandbach. Everyone has probably seen the strings. The building was finished in 2003. In 2005, we go with Fabian to a Christmas party of somebody in the art world, and I sit next to a person, very nice guy. What do you do? I'm a psychiatrist, he says. I said, great, I'm an artist. What have you done? I said, I work at the Beacon. And he said, I was Fred Sandbach, psychiatrist. Yes. And so I said, oh my God, do you know why he committed suicide? Do you know? And he said, I knew that you were going to ask me that question, and you shouldn't feel guilty in the least, because he planned this for many, many years. And he was so happy with the work at the Beacon that he felt like when that work was done, it was going to be the time. He suffered all his life, and he decided to commit suicide after the piece was done. And so that piece will never move. And so when I tell you that artists understand the sense of sacrifice, I'm not saying it lightly. I know that this is a huge issue, and I take that with a very great responsibility. Lighter subject. Glenn Ligon. And so we, at this time, after the year, we start doing a lot of other work. And Glenn comes and says, I want to do an apartment, very simple. And so these are the tests of color for the apartment. So the apartment was done in white or brown, just white and brown. And we tested 40 different varieties of brown, of different shade and pigmentation and luster. And so the apartment, the base wall in the apartment is dedicated to housing books. And the apartment, it's very, so in this case, the apartment is very different from the studio. So the studio, what I've seen in the process of working with artists in New York, I don't know if this happens everywhere, is that artists are, there was a moment where in New York, people would work and live and socialize in their own places. And as time goes by, this has become more separated. And artists now live more like public intellectuals and kind of like think of work as work rather than this mishmash of life and work. And so we've done, and this is not a genetic thing, this is just an observation of in this case. So in this case, the apartment is very quiet and very contemplative, and there's hardly any work of Glenn in the apartment. It's mostly reading material and collected objects. Very plain also. This is a house also with a great library for a couple, filmmaker and theater producer, and it's in the East Village. And so here we, because they're both in theater, we did a theater in the back of the house, outdoors. And that is the window between the kitchen, the living room and the outdoor space, the back of the house. We work with wood. We usually work with wood and brick in general. And so here, for example, this is a kind of pictorial thing that we try to do, where usually the thing that makes glass expensive are when you try to move it. If you do fixed glass is cheaper than sheetrock. And so what we try to do in our office is like when we have the opportunity for a gray view, we use fixed glass. When you need light and air, we use wood, because wood it's much more responsive to open and closing and much cheaper to do. And so in here, we organize it to be fixed glass and wood, and the wood does the air, the glass does the view and light. And so we did that throughout the house. And then here, this is a very expensive sliding door imported from Germany, wood sliding door, oak. And so here we did a compromise so this room can function inside and outside when they use it as a theater. And now I'm going to show you a couple of projects that are another contradiction. That is, what happened with an architect that is interested in people and art and difficult subjects and how to house the needy has to work for people that are very, very rich. And so one of the things that we do is we do houses for art collectors and for Larry Gagosian and things like that. And so this is a Jim Lambie stair in a house for a family, a really great family. And they decided to have a house where every room has an art piece and works with an art piece. So there's a Jim Lambie stair, and there's a Ricri Travanija playroom. And so here, it's a cube, and the girls do dance classes inside the cube, and they have play dates and things. There's a swing and a chair of a 10th Street, a stainless steel piece by Rick Ritriovanija. Then there is a living room, front bench chairs, and bookshelves. We're very good at making bookshelves. The bedroom is kind of like an antique things. Kusama in the study room. This is a house for a bachelor on Cornelia Street. So there was an existing house that was 2 stories here, and we added a floor and a half and a floor and a half and a pool in the basement and kind of luxury accommodations on the top. So that's the top with the cooking. And this is Hervé de Coste scheme for the lighting of the house. The same guy that did the Standard Hotel did the lighting for this. And so there is a chandelier that goes through inside the stairs. This is the garage with kind of like a white room. This is the pool, the library, the dining room, the kitchen, the living room, the study, master suite 2, master suite 1, and then the terraces upstairs. These are just some things that I'm going to go by very quickly. The restaurant that we did for Larry Gagosian and Chef Masa. In this case, Chef Masa is the artist, and Larry Gagosian is the kind of patron. And so in this restaurant, we use Oya stone from Japan. This stone has the property of absorbing smells. So the challenge here was to do a restaurant in a basement on Madison Avenue and 76 that has tremendous amount of fish and tremendous amount of cooking power and doesn't smell like fish. And so that you can go upstairs and buy art in the total comfort and ignorance that there's a restaurant below you. And so the stone is, it was chosen by these kind of performative qualities of smell absorption, and they're thick, and this thing that looks like a diner it's the best leather you can possibly buy, painted orange. So it's kind of deluxing material. And so this is the banquette, very, very posh. And that's the main dining room. And this opened on Friday, last Friday, so I don't have pictures of the final installation yet. Another restaurant, very detailed, that we are working on. An installation of Chagall at the Jewish Museum. And here we also use something, this show of Chagall is late work of Chagall after the war, and it's very somber. It's not the Chagall of the flowers and floating wedding dresses and things like that. It's a very dark Chagall. And so in this room, it's all crucifixions. Of course, Chagall was Jewish, but he thought that crucifixion was one of the few dignified way of showing somebody being killed. And so rather than showing kind of concentration camp images that he had seen or burnings that he had witnessed, he decided to show crucifixions of people that he knew. And so all these paintings are about 40 crucifixions done in these years. And so what we did is, the show, it's all blue, the different types of blue. And so this one, it's a very somber petroleum blue. It's a very dark blue, and very kind of a blue that it's very moody. It doesn't have much red. And then we put this bench, velvet bench in the shape of a cross. This is a lighter. This is when he is in New York. He comes back. He comes after the war to New York. And so this room has a much lighter blue tone and more space in between the pictures. The crucifixion room. And these are just two projects that I'm going to close with that are things that I'm concentrating to do, I'm trying to do now. So I'm trying to walk away from money. I'm trying to walk away from people that pay very well and start working for people like I used to do 10 years ago, for people that want me in a different way and need me. And so this is a project that we did for in the Bronx. It's an existing block, and this is the only thing in the block. It's a tree, and then there is like a baseball cage on top. And so what we did is a community center and a school. We need to build a lot of school in the next, in this administration in the next 3 years. And so this will be a cinder block school, very inexpensive. And then the baseball field will be on top and illuminated at night and open from the street so that the tree that is there, it's kept. I really believe that we need to keep as much things as we have and buy the least amount of things possible. And so I keep that tree. There is a stair here that was left from a building. We're keeping part of that. The baseball field goes on top. All these are skylights. The baseball field will not be the best baseball field. It will have some imperfections, but you will get natural light downstairs and much cheaper Con Edison bills forever. And so, and then the school is below, and it has a lot of sports activities. I believe sports are a really, really important part of society. It's one of the things that help us divert from violence. I think we need to do much more sports and make sure that every kid gets to play around and engage in group sports, organized sports. And that's the building, just mesh on top and glass, fixed glass, so it's inexpensive. This is for the Navy Yards. This is a maker community. And so here we're trying to use the same ideas as DIA, large roof, lots of daylight, single-story building, CMU. CMU is concrete masonry unit, which is the cheapest building material. And also urbanize the building so that you can go in a bicycle, on the street, in a lane, throughout the building, have lots of natural light. You see we're using the same skylights, the same angles as India. That's a view at night. That's a view of the maker spaces, the avenues or the streets in between so that you can go in a bicycle or walking or in a golf cart in between the different spaces. This is where every project starts, survey and inventory, so you know what you have there and how to work with things. And this is a rendering of what we will be proposing to do there. The last project that I'll show tonight is a library for the city that I'm from, Rosario, Argentina. And here I would like to retake the Eladio Diestes ideas of making skylights with brick and not columns. I believe this building can be done and be daylight only. I'm just giving these lights, thinking that if it doesn't work, we can probably put some solar panels and have some electric light, but I think these will be totally with just light from the sky, day and night. You would have to have hours that work with daylight. This is the roof system. It works for 3 purposes. Rain, so it takes the rain away and collects the rain and gathers the rain and kind of pave the floors so that the rain goes away and is collected. Light, so there's monitor skylights that are small but kind of open up the light and also there's lights on the side, and then air. I think this building could also be air conditioning free. I think if you have enough of a throat between the base and the top, air circulates and you don't, like all Rome, all Sicily have existed for thousands of years without air conditioning and nobody died. And so I think we just need to think differently about air conditioning and chill a bit. And just take a shower when you're hot and kind of like open the windows and paint things white so that it doesn't attract so much heat, and understand that air conditioning, it's not, of course, in a place like this, in a city dense like New York, you need air conditioning, but in Latin America, you may not need air conditioning every time for every building if you build considering that. So this is the auditorium, also thinking a non-air conditioned auditorium. And this is the reading room in the afternoon with less natural light. And so I want to end with this idea. And the idea is that I started by saying that architecture was a conflicted child, but I also want to propose the idea that architecture may be a really good mom. A mom that understands that there are kids that want to be artists, and that you have to make sure that they stay out of trouble, and they don't do drugs, and they don't commit suicide, and they do their work, and kind of help nurture that and be a systematic helper in that. And there are kids that want to be in politics, and they want to do deals, and they want to make money, and they want to build things, and they want to get elected, and they want to work in Wall Street. And we need them. We want them. And so rather than having this view of a conflicted, Freudian, violent structure, where you think about things like revolution in a good way, and you think about maybe think about compromise in a good way. Maybe think about slow change in a good way, and allow a kind of more nurturing view of architecture in the means, but also a more powerful view of architecture. Because what I like about the metaphor of the mom, rather than the conflicted kid, is that a mom takes a lot of responsibility for making sure things are okay. And so I'm perfectly comfortable as an architect taking that responsibility on, making sure things are okay. And but that also requires that when I say we cannot do this, people, politicians, artists, money people, respect that boundary, because I will be taking that responsibility only if it's understood that I know what I'm talking about and that I need to be respected. So, I'm sure you have some reactions one way or the other, and I would love to hear what you have to say. Thank you very much. So we have here that are in good shape, like the public library. People spend millions of dollars making sure they're in good shape. Buildings, the idea that a building could last more than 100 years without a major set of repairs. Windows are supposed to last 40 years. Bricks are supposed to last 100 years without a major repair. But after 100 years, or after 40 years, you need to take care of buildings. And so in Latin America, when people criticize Felix Candela or Oscar Niemeyer for doing poor buildings, I said there's a different culture of keeping up buildings and a different budget. And so a building by Le Corbusier in Paris may be better kept, but it wasn't done any more wisely. American Express, it's the biggest sponsor of architectural restoration, and they do it in places that attract tourism. So if you are in any country in the world, India or France, and you want to restore your building, and you go to American Express, you can get a grant for restoration if you can prove that you can attract tourism, and it's kind of like things like that. So many of these things, it's not in like for example, many of the Felix Candela's work, they're churches in Mexico City. And there's no a celebration of Candela at this point where, this group of people go to Mexico. Like I tour with my students every year, Brazil and Mexico from Colombia, and Colombia pays for it.
Right.
But, so I've seen the degradation in the work of, the Grupo Sur in Argentina, all that, but I cannot convince, and American Express has asked me, is there anything, and I have done proposals to renovate buildings in Latin America, but yes, if it's Niemeyer, they do it, but if it's Candela or Grupo Sur, no. And I'm very interested in using all techniques, all materials with new techniques, and not making a clean break between modern and old, or modern and postmodern. I'm interested in kind of letting the flow of time kind of be part of the building. Yes, but for example, there are two sister professions that I call architects too, that are urban planners and urban designers, and landscape architects, and now urban landscapers. Which is a very growing, a fast-growing and very interesting profession. There are people that do landscape, like the High Line, like Central Park, in the city. And they are thinking about how can we integrate more nature and open space into the plans. And they are having more success than planners, because everyone likes parks, and it's much easier to sell the idea of a park, even though you're doing the same thing. You're planning open space within a city grid. And so the professions of urban planner and urban designer have been on the decay since I've been studying architecture. I really, if you ask me who is the top urban planner in the city, I don't really know. I know Peter Marcuse. He's probably, 75 years old. And so in my generation, I do not have, like, on my phone, an urban planner and urban designer that I can tell you, oh, this is a great guy, you should invite him to talk. Landscapers, yes. I have 6 people that I would say you should have them talk, and you should have them talk about public space, public art, the city, and they are doing very interesting things in that territory. But it has, due to some failures, important failures, but also misunderstood issues. Like Brasilia, people see it as a failure. It was an experiment. We'll know one day how that is. It would be like saying New York was a failure in 1910. We wouldn't know. So the idea of, but they have retreated, and there is a kind of vacuum, and people like in the administration of Bill de Blasio, because I teach at Columbia, I get phone calls from people that are consultants to the government saying, we are thinking about so-and-so for this appointment. I know you talked with so-and-so. What do you think about this? And a lot of the people appointed are architects. They're not urban planners. They're not. And Bloomberg, it's a very good case too. Bloomberg now has, I think, the most vibrant consulting firm in the world for urbanism, called Bloomberg Inc. And they do non-for-profit work in Latin America. They're doing a project in Mexico, in Curitiba, in Buenos Aires, and I sometimes consult with them. And what they do is they take a case study and they put Amanda Burden, who was our city planning commissioner, a person in transportation, many engineers, landscape, and they try to see a problem, a city problem, holistically, and come up with solutions like the way they came up with solutions in New York. And this is something that Bloomberg is doing out of curiosity and pro bono, and his major agenda is to eliminate guns from cities and to build an argument against violence through the idea that if you have 2 million people in this area, you shouldn't have guns, not even in the police. I think there's a kind of a radical way of extending that argument, and that's why London, it's always like, we always refer to London as a paradigm. And I think the reason it's not because it's so beautiful or urbanistically so great, but because this group of people are very interested in the idea of eliminating guns from cities, in the same way that some people are interested in eliminating cars from cities.